All right, welcome to Foundations. In this program, we give you the fast track of the Sandler system. So in an hour's time, once a week, you get a basic overview of the Sandler system. In President's Club, we do a deep dive. It's 2 hours each week. And this is designed to help you get up to speed more quickly on the Sandler system. So last time we covered bonding a rapport, and we were talking about the challenge of communicating. Quick overview. Basic elements of communication vary depending on what kind of engagement you're in, but typically 7% of your message is words. The rest is body language and tonality. We will talk a lot in Sandler about learning how to manage our tonality and making sure the message that we're sending is the message we want to send. We did a little bit of work on understanding the quest your clients have from you. They really are looking for happiness, and it's found first in communication with understanding. When we feel like we're understood, I love this quote. I don't know who to give credit to. Being listened to is so close to being loved, most people can't tell the difference. So when you're listening, you are engaging in a relationship. When you play back what you hear, you are doing it actively. So we want active listening. There's a lot of people that are good listeners, but you'd never know because they don't play back what they're hearing. So learning to play back and accept others is a key to the process. So we're going to talk a little bit. We talked about, we're starting on this primary sensory dominance. Looks like my friend Todd Kurz is on. Todd, welcome. Glad to have you with us today.
Hey, Jim, how are you?
I'm doing dandy. To what do we owe the honor of your presence today?
Well, I'm just happy that you accepted me.
Todd is a Sandler trainer in Pennsylvania, right?
That's right, Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Allentown.
Yes.
Allentown's famous for something. What is it?
Oh, everyone says it. It's the Billy Joel song.
Oh, yeah. Right. So, Todd, share with let's hear your version of primary sensory dominance. Share with our clients what PSD is all about.
Well, that's a great question. I think the way I look at it is we all take in information a certain way, and we key on certain ways that communication comes into us. And so I'm a visual person, so I love to see things. When I'm thinking about things, I think through pictures, and I work with a lot of auditories right now, where I was just in a meeting with an owner just the other day, and I went in with a report to show him. And he just said to me, and I totally forgot that he was an auditory, and he goes, I don't want to look at it. I just want you to tell me what it's all about.
Right.
So he takes it in, just in the words and, how you describe things. Then the kinesthetic are the people that they need to, get the feeling. They when they hear things, they want to feel like they understand what those messages are. And I work with one guy that's a very high kinesthetic, and he's constantly struggling for words and always looking down and is always saying, it just doesn't feel right, or that feels really good. So it's how we take in the information, how we give it out.
Good, thank you. Yeah. Statistically, about 55% of the population in the United States is auditory or visual. So a higher percentage is visual, 20% kinesthetic, and 25% auditory. And the way you present differs on the way someone receives. So we talk about giving home court advantage. You'll be able to hear how people process by the adjectives they use. If you take the, for example, think about understanding. A kinesthetic will say, I get the feeling. A visual will say, I see what you're saying. An auditory will say something like, yeah, that resound, that has some resonance for me. So you can hear in the adjectives they use hints and indications of their way of interpreting things. The quicker we're able to find out how they receive information, the better we will be at presenting it. So one way of giving home court advantage is if you're selling to a visual, you got to use visual aids. If you're selling to an auditory, I'm very high auditory and kinesthetic. I'm constantly saying, use words. Please use words because I want to hear it. It makes sense to me when I hear it. I want you to, if we're looking at a spreadsheet together, I want Joan to narrate what she's looking at so I can hear what she's thinking. So it's vital to understand how we can communicate with others and adapt to fit their style. Like Todd mentioned, dealing with the auditory client, I don't want to see it, tell me about it. Being able to identify that and then communicate, giving them home court advantage, is one way to build trust quickly. People buy from people they like, and they like people who are like them. So you've all had the experience of meeting someone, and within the first few minutes, you feel like, gee, I've known them for a long time. What happened is you're looking in a mirror. You met someone who's just like you, and the connection's fast. So our mission in Bonding and Rapport is to modify our approach to fit the client. So another way we give home court advantage is by looking at their behavior styles. D stands for dominance. Dominant people tend to be very fast-paced. They're results-oriented. They don't want to hear the whole story. They want the cliff notes. I's are the influencers. They are very people-focused, typically have a high need for approval. Their greatest fear is being rejected socially. S's are the steady relators. Their steadiness, their pace tends to be very slow. They hate change. So if you're trying to sell them on something that involves them changing, you've got to warm them up to it. And then the C's are conscientious, calculating. It stands for compliance. They comply to a set of rules, very structured. Nobody is all one only. We're usually a blending. But you can tell if someone, let's go to Patsy. Patsy, what are some indications that someone might be faster paced as opposed to slow paced?
I think it's usually in the way they speak, the cadence of their tone, and probably how articulate they are.
Okay.
They may not enunciate as well.
Good.
So
yeah, the faster paced versus slower paced. Somebody who has more pauses, they're going to be a little more towards the passive, slower paced. So if you think about it, you could just jot down in your workbook, this side is slow, this side is fast. The top two are focused on tasks. They're task-oriented. The bottom two are people-oriented. So just by engaging someone, now the beauty of both PSD, primary sensory dominance, and DISC is though it may be new information to you, your brain has been processing this your entire life. And what we do is we give you a model, and the model allows you to begin to lock in on a way to manage your clients, a way to manage relationships. So, Tom, if you're, grab the mic, if you would, please, behind you. If you're working with somebody who is slow-paced and analytical, what are you going to have to do?
Really try hard to slow down because I'm an I, and that is very hard for me to do.
Right.
And not make them feel rushed, because you will lose them and they will shut down,
Right.
Juniper.
As to quote Heather, when we talk about Tom, it's holy high, right? Tom is very energetic. He's got a very high energy level. And he's, I would guess, fairly high auditory. He processes out loud. So being aware of your own style lets you figure out, okay, if I'm going to give home court advantage to the person I'm talking to, I got to be aware of what my natural style is, and I'm going to have to adapt to fit them. So on this page 21, it gives you some statistics, some suggestions on how to deal with each one of these type of people. Let's do a quick breakout session. I want you to spend a little bit of time talking with the people in your group about an engagement you've had this week with someone, or maybe this weekend, with someone who was a different style than you, and try to guess what was their primary sensory dominance and disc style. If you can start to identify it, it will help you then be able to process. Todd, are you going to be able to join the breakout group? Did he call in separately?
If you want me to, sure.
Okay. So Joan's going to send a prompt that says, would you like to join the breakout group? Click yes. Would you like to send your audio? Click yes. So we're going to have Beth. Good morning, Beth, or I guess it's afternoon. How are you doing? How was your weekend?
Good morning. It was awesome.
Great. Glad to have you with us. We have Tanya with Jory International. Good afternoon, Tanya.
Good afternoon.
And we have Patsy. Patsy, good morning. For the second time, Patsy was in our President's Club this morning. All right, so breakout session. Talk about someone you didn't quite connect with, and see if you can guess what their behavioral style is, what their primary sensory dominance is, and what you would need to do to modify your approach with them. Go. 5.
Hello.
Hello.
We're back at it, right, Joan? Live? Okay, so thinking about giving home court advantage, what's the biggest challenge? Let's go to Tanya at Jory International. Tanya, what do you think is going to be the challenge in being aware and changing your style to fit someone else? Can you hear me? There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Sorry, you have to identify somebody fairly quickly, and then it's not always easy when they can be a mix between types.
Yes.
And then trying to adjust your style, which is not, you have to be really conscious of that. And most people aren't. You just kind of go with what's natural to you.
You said it very well, and it's so unnatural initially that you're likely to, Joan, if you could open up the growth chart for me, please. You're likely to either get so overwhelmed with it's a lot you're trying to think of. Yeah. No, this one. So here are the stages of learning. Right now, when it comes to NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, or primary sensory dominance, you may be unconscious of your incompetence because you're naive. Didn't know it. Now that I know it, I'm starting to become aware of it, I'll start to see it. And the principle of awareness is a big part of change is just becoming aware. So now that I'm aware of it, I can be more intentional in changing, which leads to conscious incompetence. I become conscious that I'm not good at this. I'm not good at hearing and or adapting. Now, I've been training Sandler I'm in my 17th year. I'm still really bad at giving my wife home court advantage. I would rather just tell her, we did a project this weekend. We're hanging a piece of art. I mean, it was, if you wanted a demonstration in how not to communicate to Joan, I did a great job, right? So it's difficult, right? It really is. I successfully shut her down, right? And befuddled her because I'm fast-paced, she's slower-paced. And the more I say speed up, the more she does what? Slows down. And I say, use words. We're struggling. I'm on a ladder trying to hang this. Come on, I can't see. Tell me. Use your words. Use it. Try to use a complete sentence, right? What does that do for her? Boom, right? Didn't work. So home court advantage would have been for me to calm down and say, okay, Joan, where is that wire in relationship to the hanger? Right? I mean, it's so easy to do now that it's over. So hard to do when you're in the heat of passion. So figuring out when I need it the most is when I'm least capable of doing it. So that's why we have in Sandler training practice. That's why we do role playing. We want to encourage you to practice with your team. I know Tom has taken it on himself to give everyone in his team practice on dealing with high I's. Juniper gives practice dealing with high C's, right? And under pressure, we all adapt to something different. So Juniper, under pressure, shifts to dominance. So very analytical naturally, but fast-paced. Just get to the end of it. Enough words, right? I've seen her do this with Tom, which must mean, what's that mean, Tom? Land the plane. After you've had a couple of years in the Sandler process, you're going to get to this place, or a couple of months, you'll get to the place of conscious competence. I have to work at it, but I'm figuring it out. I'm actually able to go into a sales call, having spent enough time with a client, and if I premeditate that call, if I plan ahead, I can think through what is their behavior style, What am I going to have to do to give them home court advantage? What's their primary sensory dominance? How can I best connect with them? And by recognizing that and practice, you'll get to that point of unconscious competence where it just is second nature. I think when it comes to the DISC profile, and I think it's fast because you've been experiencing it your whole life. And if you've gone through your report and if you've had a chance to blow the dust off of it every month or so, it really helps you reconnect with what am I looking for as I develop this home court advantage. All right, so let's throw the ball to, let's hear from Beth. Beth, talk to us a little bit about how do you go about reading your client's body language?
How do I read their body language?
Yeah.
Well, kind of what you talked about. Well, I guess that's verbal, just their pace. Body language, like if somebody, stands close to me or kind of like has an approachable stance versus somebody who's more standoffish. If they look me in the eye, if they really like look directly and make eye contact, and I can tell they're connecting versus if they're just kind of looking off or staring somewhere. I don't know, just not really making good eye contact is part of how I judge that and take that in. And just like their posture is the third thing, just their stance. If they're, closed off and leaning back, I had two really different decision makers that were both making the decision, and they were like polar opposites. And one was, arms crossed, leaning back in his chair, wouldn't make eye contact with me. And the other one was leaning forward, open posture, and just direct eye contact, very connecting, very social, and it was really weird to deal with both of them at the same time, So.
Yeah. One of our suggestions is we call it mirroring and matching. If you mirror the body language of your prospect, you'll do a better job of connecting with them emotionally. And when you've got two people that are the exact opposite, that becomes a bit of a challenge. I have a good friend who, in every conversation, he looks down and to the left. I mean, he'll be talking to you, and he looks down, and he'll give you eye contact in a 60-second time frame. He'll probably be looking down 40 seconds and looking at you 20 seconds. So part of bonding and rapport with someone like that is to, while they're looking at you, you look down because you're reflecting back to them what they're doing to you. And you would think the opposite. We're supposed to have good eye contact, so I should try to engage him. Hey, up here, right? But that's not going to make them feel okay. So the tool we want you to use is this thing called okayness. So just draw on a sheet of paper a scale. On one side, put okay, and the other side, put not okay. So our mission is to always let the prospect preserve their dignity, and we do that by being aware of how are they feeling moment to moment. So in any interaction with someone, like let's take, for example, you're going to be using the pain funnel. So the pain funnel is a series of questions. What's the biggest challenge you're having with? Tell me more about that. Can you be a bit more specific? Maybe give me an example. How long has that been a problem? What have you tried to do about it? Did that work? So you have these series of questions, and in order for these questions to make someone feel comfortable, you've got to deliver them in a very nurturing tonality. If you pepper somebody, if it's an interrogation, they'll shut down. But if they're heartfelt questions asked with empathy and nurturing, people will open up. So we want you to think in terms of okay and not okay. So let's throw the ball to, let me get some microphones out here. let's go to Juniper. Juniper, I'd like you to share with us from your vantage point when you're talking with somebody who has a they aren't connecting with you. They're not okay. What kind of describe what you might see from them?
So typically some of the things I can tell that they're not okay, because this happens a lot when you tell people market value.
Right.
They lean back in their chair, cross their arms. They start tapping their foot. They'll have a specific look on their face. And so typically, and I don't know that this is right, but I would lean back and relax. Yeah. And then I would talk more softly.
Okay, good. It's a nurturing response.
But,
so we want to mirror them. Mirroring them would be feeling their pain. I can tell by your response that number doesn't make you feel very good. Is that fair to say? So they are not okay. There are degrees of okay and not okay. Somebody who's okay is going to have, let's go to Patsy. Patsy, if somebody's feeling good, what is the body language they're going to send to you?
Well, if somebody's usually relaxed and comfortable, they'll sit back a little bit in their chair. They won't be all the way back. But I have a question for you more than I think I have an answer for you.
Okay.
In my business, I often deal with the husband and wife. And I had an experience recently where she was definitely stressed, and he was discounting her. So one of them was okay and the other wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And being as they were married, sometimes I'm not quite sure how to make them both feel comfortable and okay. You know, I don't want to give the impression like I'm taking sides, but I do want them to be able to both speak up freely during the meeting, kind of thing.
Yeah. Having done a lot of sales to couples, one of the strategies that we train in Sandler is let's you and she fight. So our job is to get them fighting, because by fighting, they will find resolution. And I tell my upfront contract, usually goes something like this. Now, I got to warn you, as we engage together, there's going to be times when the two of you are in disagreement. And part of my job is going to be to help find a common ground, find a middle ground. And actually, from time to time, it might even appear like I'm doing marriage counseling. But I warn you, I charge extra when I have to do marriage counseling. And I'm usually starting the fight, so it's very self-serving. So they'll get a chuckle out of it, and it does set the parameters, because you will have discord. And should you side with one of them? Yes, sometimes. And the other? Yes, sometimes. So you have to play both sides. If you're not playing both sides, you're not empathizing with either. And your job is not to resolve the conflict. So conflict, I love this quote, the doorway to intimacy is conflict. So if you want to get someone to get resolution and agreement, it's going to be through that doorway of conflict. Our job is to not fear it, but to channel it. Did that help, Patsy?
That did. Thank you very much.
So if this purple line represents your client, and your client on a scale of 0 to 10, actually maybe the scale should be -5 to +5. That would make Juniper happy because it's more logical. And at 0, in the middle is neutral. Your goal is to stay just behind the prospect. So if the prospect is feeling pretty good, since most people want to feel okay about themselves, the way to feel okay about themselves is to find someone who is more not okay than they are. 98% of the population wants to feel good about themselves. So Todd, speak to this topic, if you would, please. share with us from your perspective, why does it make sense if I want somebody to feel more okay, I've got to be more not okay than they are?
Well, that's a good one. I guess the best way to describe that is a lot of times when I see salespeople in meetings, they want to. I'll describe it in the opposite way, and then I'll go back to what you said or asked me. Usually as a salesperson, we want to disperse all of our information, show our expertise. We want to show people that we're the person that can help them. And that gets us in front of them because people start feeling like we know more than them, that anything that they say could sound stupid. Right. So this whole concept about being behind the other person is the concept of the way you make someone feel okay is you be just a little less okay than they are, or a little more not okay than they are. So that's where struggling and being confused with questions that you hear all the time, but just making them feel like, wow, that's a great question. I'm not really sure how to answer that right now, but why did you ask? We have to teach ourselves how to make that other person feel like, hey, I just asked a really good question.
Right.
So understanding that is understanding human nature, and that is, just what it says. Hey, if I had a choice, and and we all do, I'd rather feel good about myself and good about the situation all the time. That'd be great.
Right.
And when someone makes me feel not okay, I just want to get out of there. I want to get rid of them.
And that's why it's so important for us to bear in mind, what impact am I having on my prospects? When I'm taking them through the pain funnel, they may feel not okay because it's painful, but they'll feel good about me because I'm helping facilitate discovery. If I don't do it in a way that's nurturing and empathetic, they'll feel not okay about me, and they'll get rid of me to get rid of their pain because I become their pain. So the mission here in Okay, Not Okay is for us to recognize that we are responsible for our prospects' okayness. It's my job to make sure they feel okay, and I do that by making sure I'm managing that by my presence. I love what Todd said. When you're in that show and tell mode and you're pontificating, you're using things like next page, buzzwords. Buzzwords make you feel good, but it makes the other person feel stupid. Have you ever talked to, and forgive me if some of you are IT people, but you talk to somebody IP, what's the how many MBPs upload do you have? Hell, I don't know what that means, right? And when people start using acronyms that I don't understand, I'm dominant so that I will express my negative feelings. 14% of the population is dominant. That means 86% of the people are probably not going to be very verbal in showing their not okayness, right? You may be shutting them down because you're talking over their head. You don't recognize it because you're too busy doing what? Pontificating, talking. You're telling. If you're telling, you're not selling. So in this breakout, I want you to share with your group what are some of the buzzwords common to your industry, and how guilty do you think you are in using buzzwords to speak over the head of your prospect? What kind of things should you be aware of and maybe alter in using buzzwords? Go. Give you about 5 minutes. What's that? Staging. Joan?
Per paid per click.
All right, time's up. Okay, now, Natalie brought up a great point. What if in my role I have to educate? Right? I'm in a position where I need to educate my client, and part of educating them is introducing them to some concepts that maybe they're foreign. Is that what you're asking? Because I want them to feel empowered, and I don't want to talk down at them, but yet I still need to. And the key there is you got to do some acting. Todd used the word, I love it, struggle. You got to struggle a little bit. So don't be a know-it-all. Don't know your stuff so well that it's flawless. Now, that seems very counterintuitive, right? Because you've spent your whole life trying to prove yourself. And yet I'm saying, take your product knowledge, put it in your back pocket. It's there to allow you to ask questions, not necessarily to train or tell them something. So one of the ways you can do that, Natalie, is by asking questions. So the upfront contract, so grab a microphone if you would, please. Share with the group what's your role in the firm. Is it green?
So you want me to explain my role?
Yeah.
So, well, I'm kind of in dual roles right now, but a buyer specialist. So buyer's agent, working with buyers specifically. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. And then also going to be mentoring and training new buyer's agents.
So when you said you have to train a client, what are you doing?
So I'm teaching them about the market. I'm teaching them about the different types of real estate that they can come across, about the loan process, the real estate transaction itself. I mean, on and on and on.
So the upfront contract, before you start, what's that sound like?
I would probably start by saying, the purpose of this meeting is to, to get to know your situation, to assess your needs and your wants as far as real estate goes, and to answer any questions you might have, and I have some information for you. Does that sound okay?
Okay, good.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah. And permission to ask questions to test their knowledge.
Right.
I found, so your upfront contract may sound like this. I found in a meeting like this, I could go on and on about what I think you should know, but I think it'd be more valuable if I first understand your current knowledge of the market, so that then I can help fill in the gaps, if there are any, not saying that there are. So it's very nurturing. This is back to, we want to preserve their dignity. We don't want them to feel stupid. And the best way to do that is for you to act a little less polished. Don't be quite so professional. When it comes to your attire, I think you should dress just a little, you should try to dress equal to your client. And that's one way you bond with them. I think you should probably dress just a little bit better, because that is going to reflect professionalism without projecting condemnation. So everything about you is a presentation. Be aware of the message you're sending, so that you can be aware of the message they are receiving. And you never know what message they receive until you ask. So examples of how to make someone feel not okay: rushing. How about volume? Anybody a loud talker? If you're loud and you're talking to somebody who's quiet, that's going to make them feel not okay. I always tell the story about the guy who used to sell us windows. Steve, I can't ever remember his last name. But anyway, he paused after every 4 or 5 words. And when he came to the office, I would want to just reach down his throat and pull the words out. And we quit doing business with their company to avoid him. So make sure you're moderating your tone, your tempo, your body language in a way that favors your client. Acting a little too cocky. What are some adjectives that you would use to describe a stereotypical salesperson? Slimy, arrogant, condescending, carny, right? Dishonest. If it looks like a salesperson, people will resist, right? So anything you're doing that looks like that, and when you're passionate about something, do you think you could be perceived as pushy? Probably. When you have something that you want your clients to do and they don't want to do it, how do you think that makes them feel? Right? They're going to get defensive. They're going to put up their barriers. They're going to be resistant to you. We got to pull those barriers down, and we do that by measuring and moderating their okayness. Eliminate buzzwords. All right, let's see how much time we got. We only have a few minutes left, so let's do a wrap-up with some lessons learned and some applications. So what are you planning on doing with this tidbit of knowledge you've gained today? Let's throw the ball. Beth, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure. Yeah, I like what you said about the dressing. That's something I don't really consciously take into consideration at this point, but I'm going to start thinking about that. But definitely, I think the disc profile. I'd already been, thinking about that, Jim. But now, I mean, you brought out some different ideas for how to read people and how to look and place them in each category, and that's really important because I'm such a newbie at it. Even though I'm thinking about it, I'm probably, not getting it right. And so I like that you're bringing this up again and going through it so that I can get better at placing them accurately, and then I can respond accurately and adjust myself.
Good. Great. Good action. Tanya, how about you?
I actually just had more of a question.
Okay.
And that, do you find that there's a certain disc style that finds it easier to adapt to the different personality types? Like I's are better at adjusting themselves than, say, D's are, or?
I think that's a great question. I think probably the most adaptable are the S's because they are very naturally compliant. I's are probably the worst because they're so self-absorbed. No offense, high I's.
Okay, but I've got a question for you because I'm pretty equal in S and I.
Yeah.
And I find that myself, I don't find interpreting people difficult. Like I find it almost second nature. I find it easy myself to adjust myself to gain people's trust.
Now, I don't want to be sexist here, but you do have an advantage being a woman. Women are far more intuitive. They're better nurturing. They're better teachers, right? And so I think there comes a lot of inherent pliability with women.
Okay.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you, Tanya. Patsy, how about you? What's your lesson and action?
Well, my lesson is that I really don't know this very well.
Good.
I'm just now beginning to remember the different traits for each disc personality. How you should react to them is still very new to me. So what I learned is that I need to spend a little bit of time on that. Beth had given a great example of what she had done, in a situation. So I'm going to start looking at some things, how she was able to attach that disc concept to one of her prospects.
Good. Well, you can't give us that teaser and not tell us.
Well, and I'm finding that I've kind of landed all four categories on some things. So, I have to look at that a little bit more, and I'm just about on my audio disc in this section. So.
All right, good. So one thing I'd recommend, take this page 21, make some photocopies of it, and when you're on a conversation with someone, you can start to guess where they are based on, are they task-oriented or people-oriented? Are they fast-paced or slow-paced? Are they more results-oriented? That type of thing. And it's really, if you've ever done any target practicing, you know, you first might say, oh, no, they're a D. And then the more you talk to them, so there's number 1. No, number 2, I think they're over here. No, I think they're maybe over here. And so you're beginning to focus in on what are their traits. So some of the, if you look in your DISC assessment, it gives a section on how to identify. So how do I identify someone who is C style, S style, or D style? There's, I won't have time now, but next week I'll pull up a document that is very handy for. In fact, Joan, if you would pull it up, go into the DISC handouts, and there's one that has a bunch of adjectives that I can show them. I actually have that out when I'm interviewing people, and I'm just highlighting adjectives that start to describe them, and by the end of the conversation, I've got a pretty decent idea of their profile. Thank you, Patsy. Todd, what's your takeaway?
I'm self-absorbed.
Amen to that, brother.
Amen. Oh, you know, just a great program. I love the doorway to intimacy is through conflict.
Yeah.
I love that.
Good.
I think a lot of times we look at conflict and we want to get away from it, and it just reminds me of a client of mine right now. I mentioned him earlier, the one that's an auditory. He always says it's never personal, and conflict always helps me resolve things.
Good.
And he wants conflict. He goes, I push back all the time. You need to push back on me.
Right. Nice.
So,
good, Todd. Yeah, Joan has pulled up. Here's the list, and so if you can zoom out so we see the whole page, Joan. So steadiness, somebody who's very high in S is relaxed, resistant to change. I'm extremely low. So's Tom. Hypertensive, impetuous, impulsive. So you can have some of these. The negatives, the low S is amplified by the high D. So I have somebody who is impulsive, impetuous, eager, hypertense, combined with driving, ambitious, pioneering, strong-willed. Somebody like Joan is low, very low D, peaceful, modest, mild, agreeable. So the low attributes can define you as much as the high attributes. Let's go to the home team. Jennifer, kick us off if you would. Grab that mic, shout into it. What's your lesson learned?
I think I dropped on the floor and broke it.
Oh, that's okay.
So the interesting thing is the first word that came to my mind when we were talking about the okay and not okay section is ego. And I learned that ego is edging God out. And so when your ego is more dominant than your client, then you're edging their spirit out. And so the way that I calculate that is, as long as you're aware that when your ego takes over, you're not gonna get that sale. You need to back off and let them shine.
You want to get your needs met, or do you want to close?
Correct.
Good. Paul, how about you? Grab that mic if you would. What's your takeaway?
I like the primary sensory dominance part, where basically if you listen to people, kind of key in where they're talking. They say it sounds good, looks good, kind of lets you hone in what your presentation to them is going to be.
Good.
If they're more visual.
Great catch. Tom?
The people I like dealing with the least are I's, which makes me realize I must be hard to deal with.
Is that because it's competitive?
Well, if I know that when they're doing all the talking, like I say, oh, so you're looking to buy a house, and they go, oh, well, my divorce started, you know, I'm getting this and that, and I'm going, yeah. Can you shut up long enough, you know? And so I realize I must do that. I must do that.
Nice self-awareness.
Although I think you had said something about eyes. I think eyes have a ability to mirror and match well because they act. I think they're more actors than C's and S's. You know what I mean?
And they're very competitive talkers.
No, we're not. Just kidding. No, and one last thing.
Shows why opposites attract, Jones says.
That and people that think it's all about them annoy the hell out of us that it really is all
about. Right? Natalie, what's your takeaway?
I would say for me today it was probably, I know I do ask a lot of questions, but maybe to start out asking questions when talking with someone new, whether it's a new agent or a new client, and then fill in the gaps from there.
Good.
Because I am such a high C, and so I have a list, I have a structure of how I want to talk to them in my presentation. And it's hard for me to stray from that, so I'm going to have to learn to be a little bit more
flexible.
Bring my I in.
Oh, good for you. All right. Take it away. Karma.
Well, the first thing we talked about was the PSD, and it really clarified a conversation I had earlier today that I've always had a little confusion between how people perceive things, sensory and the disc. And so now I can put them both together. I thought that somebody that was visual, maybe one disc style over another, and somebody this way, and it's not the case. And so now knowing how to mix the two and make
good
it
clarity.
Work. Yeah, that's good.
And Juniper gets what she always wants.
The last word. Well, I think as a CD, I don't really need to be your friend to buy from you.
Yeah, right.
So,
friendship's overrated. I had one once.
Yeah, I have one. I even tell them up front, I'm going to buy, so here's what I need you to tell me. If that sounds good, then we'll sign and you can leave. Yeah. But no, really. I think that for me, it's the building bonding and rapport, and then not just the disc style, but actually communicating in ways that they feel that I really understand them through the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, not just communicating based on disc style in order to build rapport.
All right, good job, everybody. Remember, if you measure it, you'll manage it. Have a great week. Sell, sell, sell.